Good evening and thanks for joining us. This is NTD Business and I'm Paul Graney. In last night's presidential debate, Joe Biden said he would transition away from the oil industry. We talked to a policy expert in Texas about the plan. We have the latest on the Hunter Biden scandal. His former business partner speaking out. He says he has evidence of Hunter's China deal. As we approach Election Day, we have updates on the U.S. economic recovery. And another country is going after Google. It wants to know if the tech giant is abusing its dominance. President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden faced off last night in their last debate. A calmer affair this time than the first debate. They actually discussed policy this time instead of just insulting each other. Here's some of the highlights on the economic side.
The debate moderator asked both candidates whether they support a $15 federal minimum wage.
Mr. Vice President, we are talking a lot about struggling small businesses and business owners these days. Do you think this is the right time to ask them to raise the minimum wage? You, of course, support a $15 federal minimum wage.
I do, because I think one of the things we're going to have to do is we're going to have to bail them out, too.
Trump said raising the minimum wage won't help small businesses. Instead, it will get workers fired. He thinks it should be up to states to decide.
It should be a state option. Look, I've lived in different places. I know different places. They're all different. Some places, $15 is not so bad. In other places, other states, $15 would be
Okay, President
ruinous.
Trump, thank you.
Trump did say he would consider a national minimum wage to an extent, but not to the level that would put firms out of business. But Biden says essential workers deserve a pay of at least $15 an hour. He said there is no evidence raising the threshold will force businesses to close. The federal minimum wage is now $7.25. States are free to set their own higher minimum. Climate change and energy policy were also part of the debate. Near the end of the face-off, Biden said he would transition from the oil industry over time.
Because the oil industry pollutes significantly.
I see.
Here's the deal. But
That's
you
a
can't
big
do
statement.
that. Well, if you let me finish the statement, because it has to be replaced by renewable energy over time. Over time. And I'd stop giving to the oil industry, I'd stop giving them federal subsidies.
Trump warned that's going to destroy the oil industry. Biden said the point is we have to move towards zero emissions, and the first place to start is in energy production. Biden's campaign website says his plan will achieve a 100% clean energy economy and net zero emissions by 2050. Biden also says he would have the U.S. rejoin the Paris Agreement, which Trump pulled out of in 2017. In their closing remarks, each candidate gave their view on how they would unite the nation.
Decency, honor, respect, treating people with dignity, making sure that everyone has an even chance. And I'm going to make sure you get that.
President Trump said he wants to cut taxes and regulations. He said success is going to bring the nation together.
And as you saw, one of the big moments of the night came right at the end when Biden said he would transition away from oil. He says he wants to reduce pollution. But Trump called it a big statement and told voters in oil-rich states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Texas to take note. I talked to Jason Isaac about the former vice president's comments. He's the director of Life Powered at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. I asked him if Joe Biden has a point about oil causing pollution here in America.
Well, any form of energy causes pollution. There's an impact on anything, whether it's 200 years ago, people cooking with wood in their homes, and there are still a significant portion of the world's population that does that, and it is detrimental to their human health. So any form of energy production has an impact. There's environmental impacts for anything that we do. And what we need to find is the one that has the least environmental impact, and that's the one that provides over 80% of the electricity that we use and the products that we use on our daily basis, and that comes from fossil fuels. And he took a very interesting stance against fossil fuels last night in the debate.
And we see it is a tight race. I think anybody's guess who could end up being president from next year on. If it is former Vice President Biden, and he does make an attempt to transition to renewable energy, is there a path there for people in places like Texas to move from oil production into renewable?
I don't think so, unless you really don't want to have reliable electricity. We're seeing the models take place in other states in the United States and other countries. And you look at Germany. Germany's tried to go 100% renewable. They've tried to go zero out on their emissions. And what you're seeing there is you're seeing electricity costs increase 50%. You're also seeing freezing deaths on the rise because people can't afford to heat their homes, and that's unacceptable. You're seeing the highest electricity costs in the United States in places like California because they're trying to invest in green bling, and it's just not working. They're supposed to have over 33% of their electricity is supposed to be from carbon-free sources, wind, solar, and hydro. And during points in August, September, and even October with cooler temperatures, less than 3% of their electricity is coming from these quote-unquote carbon-free or renewable sources. They're not meeting their own needs. And at any given time in California, over those 3 months, you had 500,000 people without electricity for hours because they were having to do rolling brownouts and blackouts to meet their loads. They just couldn't meet the demands of people. Even during this pandemic where we have the economy practically crawling along, shut down, they still can't meet the needs. And that's because they've had these unreasonable pledges to go 100% renewable. And I think they're going to try to get to 60% in California soon. So there's a model to look at across the country and to phase out good hydrocarbon-based electricity and go 100% renewable. And it's failed everywhere it's been tried.
We covered what was happening in California last month and maybe the last before. It was terrible, very sad for the people in California, terrible timing. And whenever the vice president made this comment, we saw President Trump telling people in Texas, Ohio, different states to take note. Do you think it's impacted the vice president's chances, or would it have irked people there in Texas?
It absolutely infuriates people in Texas, people in the middle, people on the left, people on the right. They recognize that over $16.3 billion just in taxes generated for the governments in the state of Texas from the oil and gas industry. That's leading to world-renowned improvements in our air quality. We've been producing more energy in the state of Texas. We're the 9th largest economy in the world in the state of Texas. But we're doing this more energy production, creating more jobs, and improving our air quality at the same time. We're #1 in the world when it comes to access to clean and safe drinking water. We hold the key to ending global poverty right here in Texas and in the United States if we can produce our energy, because we produce it better than anywhere else in the world, with more environmental protections than anywhere else in the world. And we should be exporting that energy around the world and lifting billions out of poverty. And that's what we can do. And I think former Vice President Joe Biden really turned some people off in Pennsylvania and Ohio and probably upstate New York last night, if I had to guess, because there's been lawsuits after lawsuits of people that have had their private property rights taken away because they can no longer produce energy that may be in the land that they own, and their energy costs are skyrocketing.
Jason, appreciate the analysis. We'll have you on again. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Paul.
And during the debate, Joe Biden said he's never made use of his public position to enrich himself. He said the claims of Chinese business dealings are false. And of course, he's already told us that he's never discussed business dealings with his son. But his son's former business partner says he dealt directly with Joe Biden, and that Biden's claims of not discussing business with his son are false.
Hunter Biden's former business partner says he discussed the family's China deal with Joe Biden in early May 2017.
At my approximately hour-long meeting with Joe that night, we discussed the Biden's history, the Biden's family business plans with the Chinese, with which he was plainly familiar, at least at a high level.
He said he got an email several days later. It listed how they wanted to spread out the assets, with 10% held by H for the big guy. Bobulinski says there is no question H stands for Hunter and Big Guy stands for Joe Biden.
In fact, Hunter often referred to his father as the big guy or my chairman. On numerous occasions, it was made clear to me that Joe Biden's involvement was not to be mentioned in writing, but only face-to-face. In fact, I was advised by Gillier and Walker that Hunter and Jim Biden were paranoid about keeping Joe Biden's involvement secret.
Bobulinski says he had a disagreement with Hunter about the funds. He said Hunter wanted $5 million to go directly to himself and his family, saying the Chinese company was really investing in the Biden family. Bobulinski says he's turning over 3 smartphones with evidence about the deal to the FBI. He's also meeting with Senate investigators.
And some economic news. A new report from IHS Markit shows that U.S. business activity soared to a 20-month high in October. Businesses also reported higher confidence.
Data firm IHS Markit says its Flash Composite Index, which tracks the manufacturing and services sector, rose to a reading of 55.5 this month, the highest reading since February 2019. A reading above 50 indicates growth. The survey's flash services sector rose to 56 this month, also a 20-month high. Services account for more than 2/3 of U.S. economic activity, so the increase is encouraging. Manufacturing held steady in October. The manufacturing index increased slightly from 53.2 in September to 53.3. IHS Markit chief business economist Chris Williamson said the services sector led the expansion as increasing numbers of companies adapted to life with COVID-19, while manufacturing continued to report solid growth amid rising demand from households and businesses. The survey also showed that the rate of new business growth and new orders slowed down slightly. This was driven by political uncertainty ahead of the presidential election and by concerns about the virus. At the same time, business optimism surged higher. That indicates firms have become increasingly positive about prospects for the coming year.
And stock indexes on Wall Street were mixed on Friday. S&P 500 and the Nasdaq closed higher, but the Dow went down. The Dow closed about 28 points lower, or 0.1%. S&P 500 gained nearly 12 points, or about 0.3%. The Nasdaq added over 42 points, just under 0.4%. For the week, the Dow ended down about 1%. S&P 500 fell about 0.5%. The Nasdaq declined about 1% as well. On the stimulus deal, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said it is still possible to get another round of relief before the election. But she says President Trump needs to talk to Senate Republicans. Trump and the Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin, though, they say that Pelosi needs to compromise. Would you have guessed? And I talked to Nick Reese about the latest PMIs. He's a senior analyst with Merck Investments.
Towards the end of each month, we get the preliminary PMIs, which give us an early indication for the month that we're in. So the month of October, we got a slew of global PMIs for both manufacturing and services overnight. And the general theme there was that manufacturing PMIs, which are an indicator of the health of the manufacturing sector, any readings above 50 are expansionary, below 50 are contractionary. Those readings are holding up pretty well above 50, and most of them even moving higher from levels already above 50. But when we look at the services PMIs, we see many of those either remaining below 50 or falling back below 50, which suggests some deceleration or even outright contraction in the services sector. And I think that's not too surprising, maybe given the nature of this ongoing pandemic. I think last month was at the highest level since 2009, so since the recovery coming out of the last recession. So that is a good indication. And these manufacturing readings, as I said, are generally pretty strong. So pretty consistent with coming out of a recession and getting into an economic recovery. It's going to need to become much less volatile relative to the dollar in order to become a real payment system. I still see it mainly as a trading vehicle. It's extremely volatile. It has some interesting properties from a purely speculative standpoint. And I think that we're still in the early stages of Bitcoin's development. It's only been around for about 10 years, and the future of it is very uncertain. But I think it's the original cryptocurrency, and we may see another sort of big boom, speculative boom in it, like we saw back in 2017.
Interesting. Nick, appreciate your insights as always. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Paul. You too.
And earlier this week, we covered the U.S. government's antitrust lawsuit against Google. Now the tech giant is facing criticism in South Korea. Some lawmakers there are accusing it of abusing its market dominance.
South Korea's antitrust chief says the agency believes Google has undermined competition. She says South Korea's Fair Trade Commission, or KFTC, is investigating allegations that Google restricts competition in the mobile app market and operating system market. She said it plans to send one of the cases to the deliberation committee by the end of the year. She didn't say which one. The KFTC is accusing Google of blocking local smartphone makers such as Samsung from using other operating systems. It also says they are forcing developers to publish their games only on Google's Play Store. A Google official blog post says South Korea is ranked near the top in terms of app revenue and the average of apps installed each year. The country has the world's most advanced mobile infrastructure. Google could not immediately be reached for comment. If the committee determines that Google has broken the law, it could fine, order corrective measures, or prosecute the tech giant.
And a Chinese regulator says Tesla will need to recall 50,000 electric cars in China. Authorities there say Model S and Model X cars might have suspension problems. The cars in question were made in America between 2013 and 2018, then exported to China. A U.S. vehicle safety regulator, though, hasn't made any similar announcement here. And the very latest on the battle between California and ride-hailing companies. An appeals court says they now have to go back to classifying drivers as employees.
A legal blow to Uber and Lyft. A California appeals court unanimously ruled Thursday that the ride-hailing companies must reclassify their drivers in the state as employees. It all began in May. That's when California sued the two companies for not complying with a state law that aims to reclassify app-based workers as employees who are entitled to benefits such as unemployment insurance and the minimum wage. A California judge in August ordered the companies to reclassify their drivers as employees. Uber and Lyft filed an appeal threatening to leave the state. The appeals court judges ruled Uber's and Lyft's misclassification irreparably harmed drivers because they missed out on employee benefits as independent contractors. Lyft and Uber said they were considering all legal options, including an appeal. The court ruling will not go into effect before a November 3rd company-sponsored ballot initiative that will let voters decide the future status of gig workers. Still, the decision narrows the company's options should their ballot fail. Shares of Uber and Lyft fell in early trading Friday.
And still to come this evening, a former Mighty Duck and now a cryptocurrency millionaire is running for president. Hear what Brock Pierce's vision is for the country after the break. Welcome back. You might remember Brock Pierce from the Mighty Ducks kids movie. Well, now he's running for president. Brock's been busy since his time on set. He's now a cryptocurrency entrepreneur. Forbes says he could be worth $1 billion. He's an independent candidate running on a more unique platform than the main candidates. He wants to balance the federal budget. 2 thumbs up for that, of course. But he also wants to offer a universal basic income. He says the country could be run more efficiently and resources could be allocated better. He said the first thing we need to do is safeguard the US dollar.
22% of all dollars in existence were created this year. And so as we do things that erode trust, faith, and confidence in it, that presents its own problems. And then we also face external threats. For example, I created the US digital dollar in 2014. That dollar is doing $10 trillion a year in transactional volume. And so governments around the world are using that technology framework to enhance their currencies. Specifically, China is years ahead with the Chinese digital yuan. And so we have to make sure that the US dollar is staying competitive in terms of the faith and trust that we're instilling in it, but also technologically as systems continue to change. That's one, and yes, you're not going to hear any of this type of conversation in our debates, which is shocking. I mean, every election I've ever remembered, fiscal policy was a core topic of discussion, certainly of debate. Now, on the other hand, the technology is changing the landscape of work. It is going to be replacing tens of millions of jobs. And we have to find a way to heal this economic divide. We are the wealthiest nation in the world. This country doesn't have a resource problem. We have a resource allocation problem, an efficiency problem, an accountability and administrative problem. There are ways for the government to be more efficient. For example, we run off this use it or lose it policy. So if you get a bigger budget and you don't spend it, you don't get it the following year. Meaning, if you come in business under budget, you get a bonus, a raise, possibly a promotion. And there are things the government can do to be far more efficient at a time where America is going to need a safety net. No one in this country should be starving to death. Everyone should have some form of shelter if they wish it, and everyone should have access to health care if they need it.
And any last words to people who are still undecided, Brock?
So yeah, I'd remind everyone that I think our objective in life is to act according to our conscience, which means we should vote our conscience. We should vote for whatever we feel is right. And to ignore these statements about throwing your vote away, it's simply not true. I was giving a press conference in Minnesota 2 days ago, and it was wonderful. It was with Jesse Ventura, former Governor Jesse Ventura, and when the press asked him about this, and being a spoiler, he said, yeah, when 38% of Minnesotans threw their vote away on me, oh wait, we won. Mic drop. Do you know the last third-party president to be elected in the United States? That third-party president, that third-party candidate was Abraham Lincoln. And so great changes can happen. I think that our job in life is to be our best selves. We only have the power to change ourselves, but as we become our better selves, we have the ability to inspire others. So as we act according to our conscience, we can collectively act according to our conscience. And I think we're going to stay in this loop until we break free and start acting accordingly. Thank you so much. You can learn more at www.brock.vote.
Some timeless advice. Brock, really appreciate it. Best of luck for the next couple of weeks.
Thank you so much.
And still to come this evening, Croatia strengthens its position as one of the world's top producers of this particular food. You probably cook with it fairly often yourself. And up more after the break. Welcome back. Watch out, Spain. You've got some competition in the olive oil industry. In just the past 15 years, Croatia has become one of the world's top olive oil producers. One region in particular is getting top industry awards.
This year, Croatia's Istrian Peninsula won the Flazalis Guide's Best Region in the World Award for extra virgin olive oil. Locals are proud of their olives.
This is one thing that not every country has. Every country has clubs in the sea and so on, but only a very few countries have such olive oil and olives.
Spain, the world's largest olive oil producer, makes over 1 million tons each year on average. Croatia made just a fraction of that amount last year, only over 3,000 tons. One local producer says that's what makes their quality so good.
It's very important that we do not have any mass production. We only operate in a smaller production. For example, our orchards are small, mostly run by families. The olive harvest is done manually. They are processed immediately, and the quantity produced is relatively small.
The director of the tourist board says they've had at least one world champion since they joined the guide in 2005.
First of all, Istria has been the best region for growing olives for extra virgin olive oil in the last 6 years. We have won almost every year with more than 70 oils, which have been awarded in the top 500 best olive oils in the world.
The guide compares oil farms internationally and is compiled by expert tasters.
That's the latest business updates for this week. Thanks so much for watching. Have an awesome weekend. We'll see you Monday.